everyone in, let's start off with some introductions. So for those of you who weren't able to come to the previous meeting, maybe we're seeing each other in person for the first time, I am Nora Moriarty. I work here at the Putnam as assistant curator, and my background is actually in Greek archaeology. So I have a master's in Greek and Roman archaeology from University of Colorado, beautiful campus. And I had the privilege of excavating in Greece for a few seasons. So I actually did excavate at a site called Mitru, which is about 2 hours up the coast from Athens. And that site was occupied by humans between the Neolithic period and the Iron Age period. So it had a very long occupation. So it was very, very exciting. And I, of course, have a love for Greek archaeology as a result of that. And I am just so gosh darn happy to be going back to Greece again. This will be my first time back since working there as an archaeologist. And I think this trip is going to be absolutely fantastic. So I'm very excited. Linda, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, hello.
You're here. Come on in.
My name is Linda Meadows, and I have been involved with travel planning for about 25 years, in addition to a career with the healthcare system, raising money. But I have been fortunate to work with a number of not-for-profits, the Botanical Center and the German American Heritage Center, and a couple of churches and the Putnam. And so this will be the second trip that I have collaborated. I really feel that when an organization that you belong to or you can belong to, and I urge you to belong to, is here, you're going to meet like-minded people. And the best thing about travel is you're going to share an experience together that's a one time or one of a kind experience. And what I have found over the years, after you've started traveling with an organization one time, you want to go again because of what you learned before you take the trip and what you learned during the trip and then coming back. So I am thrilled that the Putnam is going in this direction. And tonight, if you have come and you're still making up your mind, I hope you make up your mind and make that decision. I'll be available tonight to get a registration form in your hands, and I can even accept a deposit. So, Nora, take it away.
Why don't we get a hand count? How many people are already signed up? I think the majority of us. Wonderful. Okay, great. So we have a few people in the crowd still considering. We're not putting pressure on anyone. Still have a few people considering, but we'd be very happy for everyone in the room to join us on this amazing trip. And now we are going to be doing kind of a crash course in Greek archaeology and art. We're talking, if you count the Neolithic, tens of thousands of years of history. We're not going to go into all of it. We're kind of skipping along the surface as we go. And I started making an outline a couple weeks ago. And if you can see the size of the type, I have pages and pages and pages of this. I will not be reading everything on these pages. Please do not worry. We're going to hit the highlights. All right, and don't let me if I take a sip from my obnoxiously large water bottle. I'm the runner around one today. Okay, so we're going to be traveling together. Should we do a quick introduction of everyone? Should we go around and just have everyone say the name and what they're most excited about? All right, let's see. Who should be? Cindy, why don't we start with you?
I'll start. So my name is Cindy Deal Yang, and my husband Al and I are both going on the trip. And Greece has been on my bucket list forever. We were supposed to go the year of the pandemic. So very, very excited just to be able to get all the islands and get all of the in-depth knowledge that we have here.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us what you're most interested in.
I'm Chris Woodard. I'm still exploring.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm Joyce Stahl from Cambridge and just something new, something different. I never even thought about it till Jolene put the book in my ear.
Didn't even
Oh,
know where
Jolene's
Jolene's at.
the
You wanted to go, she goes, where are we going?
Up for anything. I'll take it.
Yes, definitely. I'm Jolene Allen from Cambridge as well. I've never traveled in Europe, so and I have friends that have been to Greece and they were telling me what a great time they had on a cruise. And when I saw this on the, Quad Cities Live, I guess is where I saw it. So when I started investigating it, checking into everything, talking to Linda several times and, very excited. Think it's gonna be a great time.
I was working on Morgan and Kylie while I was there, or Kyle.
man.
We'll have to twist the knife a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm Helen Moorhead. I live in Bettendorf and, my grandparents are all from Greece. I'm the second Greek American and, I came across it on the website. I mentioned it to my sister. That's why we are here.
I'm so happy to have you.
And we're sisters.
That suffices, huh?
I'm hard to grab.
Very excited. All right, Pat and Norm.
At Normbell, or from Bedford. We've been to party places where we're going to the first 4 days on land, but haven't been to since I've not been wanting to go to Santorini for quite some time. And things have gotten way like
Yeah,
COVID, et cetera.
I'm excited for the islands too. When I was working there, I never got to go to the islands. So this is gonna be very exciting for me. I feel you. Right?
Judy's give birds.
Excited about the combination of the land with the cruise. And I want to see Santorini before it slides into the ocean.
Marianne and Rob. We actually would do the same trip by ourselves in June, July. And planned it through Blue Horizon. And when this came up, we said, oh, we don't need to go by ourselves. So we're canceling that one. We're doing this for the same trip.
Great. Well, I'm so happy Linda convinced you. It's been
Oh, that didn't take part. Oh, with Linda and
I'm Carol Summer and I too have always wanted to visit Greece.
By the way, everyone, Carol Summer is my mom. She came with us to Egypt too and had a blast. It was a fantastic Egypt trip last year. That was the other one that Linda collaborated with us on. Taking shot?
Yeah, Vicky Graves, from Moline. And we're still thinking, we're still looking at calendars, but, I've been to Greece, but on my own with a friend. And so not with a group of people who know a lot, so. It's been real.
Sean, great. Looks interesting.
And it's such a good group of people.
And it's my job today to make sure it looks very interesting to you. Michelle?
Michelle and Dan Darlin, we're from Davenport, and I was, when I knew that Nora was going to be going and giving an inside scoop on the Greek history. So, I mean, anytime you can go to Greece, but you don't have the specialization of the concierge experience of having someone that knows so much about it. So, and we put 3 kids through college and we are emancipated.
Yes.
At one time.
Oh.
Plans on.
Celebratory. Huh?
Yes. We have 10-year anniversary too.
Oh,
Congratulations. So is your anniversary happening while we're in Greece?
A little before, on Labor Day weekend, but we'll celebrate throughout.
Sounds good.
I'm Bridget Carlson. I work here at the museum. My sister and I are both planning. We are going on this trip, and I was interested for some of the same reason Michelle said, or the experience. For its Greece has always been on one of my lists.
Hi, I'm Ruth Walker. I'm from West Dundee, Illinois. I found the Putnam when my niece's twin started grad school at Iowa. So we met here one day, and when I saw the flyer, I said, "This is exactly what I need." And always been fascinated with history, and I'm just thrilled that you'll be with us and sharing what you know. Because as you know, sometimes you go on tours and you get different results, sometimes they're really good and sometimes it's somebody who doesn't really know a lot. And obviously we were very well versed, and I was very impressed with how organized everything was. And we talked on the phone and it was easy. My husband's gonna be coming too. Hopefully my niece will join after tonight, and I made the trip out here just because I wanted to meet all of you guys that I'll be traveling with. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Well, I think we got it, but thank you everyone so much for sharing and for coming.
Yeah.
Cindy started off.
Oh, so it's a recipe.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's what happened. I was used to people talking.
I'm Ruth Walker. I just got my bachelor's in April and not in grad school. So I have the freedom to go on this trip.
Well, congratulations on getting your bachelor's. Way to go. Well, okay. Thank you, God, everyone. So, like I said, we're going to kind of skim the surface of Greek history and art today. We're going to go chronological. I think that's just the simplest thing to do. So, let's get started. Probably we were talking for so long, the thing decided. Okay, here we go. All right, what are some of the things we think of when we think of ancient Greece? Go ahead and shout them out.
Togas.
Togas, okay. Uzo, okay. We got a party animal back there. What else do we think of? Maybe beaches? Beaches, yeah. Olympics, of course. Good ones.
I think of God, yeah.
We all have this impression of ancient Greece. It's something we all learn in school. It's part of everyone's curriculum. And there's probably a few things I'm going to talk about today that will, be like, oh yeah, I remember learning about that. But Greek history is so exciting because it encompasses so many innovations. And the Greek civilization from the Bronze Age had such an incredible ripple effect throughout time. We still feel the influence of what the Greeks did thousands of years ago today in our own modern society. The politics of Greece, the founding of democracy. By the way, when we get into that and how that comes about is just so gosh darn interesting. The artwork still influences our modern artwork to this day. Also, the epics. Who here has seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
You're a decorated man.
Based on the Homeric epic, The Odyssey. And what a great movie. Oh my gosh. Anyone who hasn't seen where Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I highly, highly recommend it. It stars George Clooney, and it's kind of this American Southern retelling of the Odyssey. Very good. Now, as we start, let's put Greece in the larger context of the Mediterranean world. Now, as you can see here, we got Greece right here, and to its west, Italy. To its east, we've got Turkey, Asia Minor. We've got the Levant down here, Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, and of course, Egypt. Now, as Greece was still in its infancy, Egypt was making humongous strides in civilization, architecture, art, government, things like that. Egypt was well on its way by the time we even started Greece. And at that point, the Near East, and even off the map over here, the Near Eastern cultures over here were also alongside Egypt, working towards great things, monumental structures and artwork. So in a lot of ways, Greece is kind of the little brother of the Mediterranean world. He's, coming up a little bit younger than everybody else, kind of figuring things out, kind of looking to the big brothers to see what direction to go in. And there is a lot of cultural influence happening all over the Eastern Mediterranean. There are so many culture clashes through trade, through warfare. They are well aware of each other's existence. Now, Greece is interesting in the Mediterranean because Greece's environment is so different from the other Mediterranean powers. Greece is dry, it's arid, it's similar to high desert. It's also incredibly mountainous. We've got these mountain ranges all throughout. It's very choppy. Traveling on foot around mainland Greece is a task. It's not easy to do. You have to know the mountain pass. You have to have a good cart. It's just not that simple of a task. And so the Greeks found it to be much easier to get in a boat. Even when traveling from one point of Greece to another, it was just easier to get on a boat than go over land. So from the start, the Greeks were a seafaring people. They were building boats right off the start. They were all growing up with water, learning how to swim from probably infancy or toddlers. And so really it's all about the Aegean Sea for them. It is all about the water and their access to water. The other thing about Greece is that there were so few natural resources. It's not the easiest land to farm on. Only a few things really grow well there. It's also not a great place if you want to make your own metals. They don't naturally occur here. They have to trade to get a lot of the materials that they need for that. We'll talk about that later. But once again, if you're a seafaring people, look at all this coastline you have. Look at all this. It's so crabbly. There's just access to water everywhere. There's harbors everywhere. There's rocky, dangerous harbors too, where you can trap your enemies. The Greece is just living in basically a water world. And that's not just the islands, that goes for the mainland too. I want to read you a quote here from a book about ancient Greece by a woman named Pomeroy, Sarah Pomeroy. And I just really love this quote. The history of the ancient Greeks is one of the most improbable success stories in all of world history. A small people inhabiting a poor country on the periphery of the civilizations of Egypt and the Near East, the Greeks created one of the world's most remarkable cultures. In almost every area of the arts and sciences, they made fundamental contributions, and their legacy is still alive in Western and Islamic civilizations. It's really kind of an underdog story. Now, like I said, few things grow here. The things that do grow here, grains, grapes, and olives. So what's that? Bread, wine, and olive oil. So they're set up with some good resources. What they do. Now, another thing I'll say, how do we know any of this? What's our sources? First off, archaeology, obviously, digging things up. We find material culture. The other way that we learn about these people is their preserved literature. Hesiod, Plutarch, Thucydides. If anyone is interested in some primary source reading before we go, I recommend these three authors. Very informative. In fact, Hesiod is the oldest of these authors. He comes from the same time as Homer, and he talks about not only the beginning of their mythology in Greece, but also what average daily life was like in Greece. A great resource. All right, let's keep moving. All right, we're going to start with the Stone Age. And I'm going to just lump this all together, Paleolithic to Neolithic. That's basically Old Stone Age to New Stone Age. So as you can see, we start in 40,000 BC. And like many people in the world at that time, there were cave dwellers. In fact, Frankly Cave, which is up in the corner right there, was a cave site that had continuous occupation for almost 30,000 years. So we know that the Greek people started off their history in much the same way as a lot of other human civilizations that we know of, semi-nomadic, moving throughout the year, using caves as shelter, and probably having summer homes as well. Now, at the end of the Stone Age, the important stuff that happens is domestication of animals. That's important because it's reliable sources of meat and milk. And with that comes agriculture. Agriculture is important not only because it's reliable food sources, but it means that you can settle down. You don't have to be nomadic anymore. You have your reliable food, you have your animals, and you have your plants. You can settle in one space. You can have a village together. And as people gather into villages, they start to specialize in tasks, and we get crafts. Now, down here at the bottom, we have a stone figure right here, often called a goddess figure or fertility goddess figure. We see these all over the Mediterranean during the end of the Stone Age. Basically, just seems to be kind of a mother goddess figure. And then we have some simple pottery at the end of the Neolithic. So we are getting into these crafts right away during history. Now, the Bronze Age. This is the good stuff. Now, first off, Bronze Age. Why did we name it after metal? What was so important about bronze? Bronze was the marriage of copper and tin. Native copper, just plain copper on its own, is not good for making weapons or farm tools or knives or anything. It's not reliable. It'll bend, it'll break. It's hard to shape. It's not easy to work with. But around 3100 BCE, someone figured out that if you melt copper down with tin, about 90% copper, 10% tin, you get this new metal that's stronger, can be made to be sharper, and is more durable. Now, I will say this, bronze was not invented in Greece. It was invented probably somewhere in the Eurasian steppes. We're not really sure where yet. But it was traded into Greece probably pretty shortly after. It seemed to have spread like wildfire once people discovered bronze. Now, we're going to start with our civilizations in the Minoan civilization. Now, the Minoans are very mysterious. At least that's how it was pitched to me when I was a young student. They're so mysterious. Now, the Minoans, we call them mysterious because while we do have a lot of their material culture, we have not yet translated their written language. The Minoans did have a written language called Linear A, which as of yet has not been reliably translated. But here's the exciting thing. Someone's working on it right now and using AI to make some great strides in the translation. The AI can read so much more faster than any human can in their life. And so we may see a breakthrough in the next 5 years. Now, imagine for a moment, it's the beginning of the Bronze Age, let's say mid-Bronze Age, while people travel. And maybe you're a shepherd in rural Greece. And you've been living in a small hut, 1 to 2 rooms with mud bricks, probably a thatch roof of some type. Maybe, you have a small herd that you take care of. And you get an opportunity to travel. And you have the opportunity to travel to Crete. These people with these amazing boats show up on your shoreline, and you decide to go and see what it's all about. Imagine going from your mud hut, maybe your small village of mud huts, and seeing this. This is a reconstruction of the Palace of Knossos. This is stone masonry with columns supporting large structures, multi-story. Can you imagine the effect this would have had on your average Greek traveler seeing something like this? You would have thought that gods built it. And imagine the gigantic leap forward the Minoans had taken from end of the Neolithic age to this. That's really something. In a matter of centuries, they managed to achieve that. Now, Knossos is not the only Minoan palace like this. There were quite a few, actually, several on the island of Crete alone. And the Minoans were trading all over. They were making contact all over the Aegean. Right here, this picture of the ruins, this is Akrotiri. This is the Pompeii of the Aegean. You've all heard of Pompeii, Roman city frozen in time by a volcanic eruption. Akrotiri is a Bronze Age Minoan city frozen in time because of volcanic eruption. Now, this excavation is very exciting because we are seeing more of the daily life of the Minoans here. It's kind of filling in the gaps of what we're lacking from not knowing their written language. You can see we've got preserved storage jars. There's preserved frescoes on this site. It really is just such an exciting time to be in archaeology. Now, just check out for numbers.
Nora,
Question?
on YouTube, there is a subscription called History in 3D. And it can show you Gnosis.
Yeah.
Really cool. So if you want to get it like an early, like what it might be like, it gives you like a walkthrough. They recreated it 3D, that the palace.
Is this the same site that did Rome?
Yes.
Ah, see, that is very, very cool. I'm
History-
so happy to hear that have one of this.
History in 3D.
Oh, fantastic. History in 3D, everybody. Now, Akrotiri was frozen in time in 1628 BCE. That's when the volcano goes off. Now, this volcano is basically the island of Santorini that we have today. When we go back to the map in another little bit, I'm going to show you Santorini is kind of shaped like a crescent with a little island in the middle. That is the caldera or rim of the volcano. So this is a volcanic island. It goes off in 1628 and mass destruction, but it preserves. It preserves. Now, once again, Minoans are trading all over the place, and they are also creating a centralized government. This is a redistribution center, a worship center, and a political building right here. You can imagine a perhaps king and queen, perhaps just a queen, and they are receiving tribute here. Here's a floor plan of Knossos. So we've got a central court, probably where events were happening, like maybe some bullfighting. See that in another slide. Celebrations, maybe they gathered for worship here. We're not sure. There's a few frescoes that show, but we just don't know enough yet to know exactly what was going on there. Now, as far as tribute goes, this is the extensive storage area. So all that tribute that's coming in, all the things they brought in from trade too, they're storing in giant vases, rough earthenware vases, grains, oils, things like that. And they are getting lined up in all of these rooms over here. That's a lot of wealth in one place, a lot of wealth. And some other features over here, this room right here is probably where the ruler met with delegates. There's also another throne room too, but it's typically what we later consider to be a megaron. Megarons are areas where we think kings and queens probably met with subjects, the higher up subjects, not the riffraff, they couldn't be bothered to meet with them. But when Knossos was being excavated by Sir Arthur Evans in the 19th century, he saw this big room here, and then there's a smaller room, very similar design right here. And he said, oh, the big one must be for a king and the little one must be for a queen. So he was thinking in very Western European terms. he was thinking like, oh, every civilization has a king and a queen, so surely the Minoans did too. But did they? Once again, like I said, we'd see another slide here with the map just to orient us. Down here in Crete, this is Knossos, right about right there or so. And Santorini is due north. You see how it's kind of crescent shaped? Yeah, that's just a big volcano right there. Now, Crete, like I said, did have other palaces. Right here, Festus, Pylos, there was quite a few different palaces, and they're probably all running their region. Let's talk about art a little bit. Here's that bullfighting I was talking about. Bullfighting, bull leaping, this fresco, which the darker spots are the original and the lighter spots are where it's been restored. This is an interesting scene because was it common practice to have bullfighting? Was it a show of strength? Was it a ritual of entering manhood? We don't know. Something else interesting here. You see the person in the middle who's actually on the back of the bull, seemingly in mid-leap, has darker skin, and then the people on the sides have lighter skin. Most archaeologists theorize that if someone is shown with lighter skin, they are a woman, and if someone's shown with darker skin, they are a man. It's kind of an ideal of beauty situation. Now that theory is up for debate. I've actually gone into this debate a few times in papers. I'm not 100% convinced yet. But that is the going theory, that you perhaps have two attendants that are women and then the man who actually engages with the bull. But here's the interesting thing. This person over here, are they getting gored? Or are they holding on to the horns for some reason? Are they trying to control the bull? We don't know. What was the purpose of this? Was there a purpose of it? Maybe it was just a game. Something else I can point out to you here. Look at the splay of the bull's legs. It is mid-kick. It's fighting. They're expressing the movement of the animal so well with that pose, aren't they? It's not static. It's very much dynamic. And up here, we have some very lovely looking ladies, probably members of the nobility, dressed to the nines. They have textured quilted vests on that are open at the front. They are wearing necklaces, beaded necklaces. And look, they even seem to have pearls in their hair. They are dressed very, very finely. And once again, look at the movement, the turn of their head, the curl of the hair. It's very flowing. It's very round. You can really just sense the conversation. The Minoans are incredibly expressive artists. And the octopus juggler here, asymmetrical, flowing throughout the shape while complementing the shape of the vase. Very accomplished. Minoan art was the envy of the Mediterranean world. Something I discovered recently is that there is a town in Egypt, in central Egypt during the New Kingdom, middle to New Kingdom, where the vizier of that town hired Minoan artists to come and decorate his palace. It's Minoan frescoes. It's not Egyptians imitating Minoan art. It is authentic Minoan frescoes. Minoan artists were being commissioned by other civilizations during this time. And we have a very famous lady right here, known as the snake goddess. Now, obvious reason, she's holding a snake in both hands. She's wearing the open vest that we saw in the previous image. And her skirt, look at all these tiers of her skirt. Think that's cheap? That's a lot of fabric. She's showing a lot of wealth there. Very, very opulent. She's got her apron on, and on top of her head is a cat, or perhaps representing a panther right there. Once again, we don't know that much about her. She's still a very mysterious figure. But most likely a goddess with how she's being depicted with all these attributes. Interesting thing about Minoan art. We, as of yet, have no evidence of a king or a male god. None. Does this mean they were a matriarchal society? We don't know. Was their pantheon all female goddesses? We don't know. Hopefully these translations that they're working on of Linear A will give us some clues. Now we've got some other guys over on mainland who were growing up around the time that the Minoan civilization was becoming, its prime, was getting into its prime. The Mycenaeans. Now the Mycenaeans are coming up a little bit later. Takes them a few hundred years after the Minoans to kind of get their stride. Now, the Mycenaeans, all this cool structure that you see here, all this stuff, that wasn't built until after they went to Crete and conquered the Minoans. The Minoans seems like quite a powerhouse, didn't they? That structure, the trade, they're in charge. They've got the Aegean Sea in their hands. But in the Minoan art, did we see any examples of war? Any show of weapons? The most violent scenes we get from Minoan art are hunt scenes, going out and hunting ducks, fishing, things like that. No scenes of war. The Mycenaeans are warmongers. They are interested in conquering. They look around and they're like, we're on the mainland. We don't have as much access to everything. We see what the Minoans are doing and we want to get in on that. So the Mycenaeans decide to go after Crete and they wipe out the Minoans. Well, okay, I shouldn't say wipe out. The Minoans survive. That was misleading of me to say. The Mycenaeans take over. They move into the palaces. They install their own kings. And they start ruling. In fact, there's a very confusing time in Greek history where the Minoans are being ruled by the Mycenaeans, but out of Minoan palaces, and they're still producing art, but it's under Mycenaean rule, and it is so confusing. Because you're looking at something like, is this Mycenaean or Minoan? But eventually, the mainland Mycenaeans, the people who stayed behind in Mycenae, they're like, hey, you guys have a lot of good stuff. We don't have as much good stuff as you. So even though we're cousins, we're going to come get that stuff. And so then the Mycenaeans come back and really start conquering. Now, that is about when they build their citadel. This is a walled city, big, big stone blocks in this wall. This is a big project, and it's defensive. The Palace of Knossos was airy and light and open in all directions, and all those columns really opened it up. The Mycenaeans are about keeping everything safe and everything in our territory. These walls right here, look at how large these blocks are. It's called Cyclopean masonry, because in the Dark Ages, after the fall of the Bronze Age, the new Greeks come in and say, who the heck could have moved these? They're just too big for a human to move. It must have been giants. It must have been cyclops. So even the later Greeks, a few centuries later, cannot understand how these kind of structures were built. Now, what we have here, when we go to Mycenae on our Peloponnese land tour, we're going to approach up to the Lion's Gate right here, and you're going to see this. In this image, but two lions flanking a column. The column is a Minoan style column. It's a show of force. They're showing off. The lions obviously represent power. And this is a great defensive strategy, because if you had people coming up here, enemies who are trying to, besiege you, you just put your archers up on the walls around the gate and just shoot straight down on them. Over here, nearby, not inside Mycenae, but nearby, is a Tholos tomb, often called the Treasury of Atreus, or the Tomb of Agamemnon. It is a tomb rather than a treasury. It's called a Tholos tomb. It's kind of like a beehive inside of a hill. Got a very cool vaulted roof effect that they did a great job on. Still very strong. Here's a plan of Mycenae. We're going to compare it to Knossos here. So it's a little turn from our last image. So let's see, here's our Lion's Gate right here. Here's our approach. Right here, this circle is called Grave Circle A. Very, very interesting things came out of Grave Circle A from probably the 15th or 14th century, BC, of course. And we've got a few objects here that are reproductions of those types of objects. And by the way, these are the only reproductions on the table. Everything after this is going to be authentic. Who's seen this guy before? The Mickey, yeah. Now, this is affectionately known as the Mask of Agamemnon. Agamemnon, from the Homeric epic in the Iliad, he is the leader of the Mycenaean, the Greek troops, when they besieged Troy. And the gentleman who was excavating Mycenae was a man named Heinrich Schliemann. And I think it was the 1870s when he was excavating Mycenae. He was so obsessed with proving that the Trojan War really happened, that it wasn't just myth. And so everything he found in Mycenae, he said, yep, that's Agamemnon's. That's Clytemnestra's. Yes, okay, this is proof. He was so eager about it. And he really, modern archaeologists really cringe at some of his tactics. But he found this mask inside Grave Circle A. Now, a funerary mass like this, it would have been a thin sheet of gold that was pressed to the deceased's face to mold to their features. Now, you'll see there's some extra detail in this. The texture of the hair, the eyebrows. Really pretty detailed, isn't it? Well, that's the thing. That's a controversy. There's a few people who accused Heinrich Schliemann of taking an authentic mask that he found in the grave circle. And he was so desperate to prove that this was a king, that this was Agamemnon, that he himself went in with a stylus and made it look better than it did. When we go to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, you'll see the other masks that came out of that grave circle. None of them look like this. None of them have this kind of detail. It's pretty questionable. But we do have this replica of it in the Putnam collection. In fact, a lot of museums around the world have one of these. And another example, the type of grave goods that you would find in a grave circle like that. This is a reproduction of one of the Vafio cups. Shows bowls. Very good craftsmanship, isn't it? Now, this is not something we suspect Schliemann have messed around with. The Vafio cups actually came from a different site.
Was it in the notes of the?
Well, the Minoans have the bull fighting scene.
Kind of bullish.
There's a lot of overlap. Okay. And the famous story of the Minotaur was inspired by the labyrinth-like quality.
Okay.
All right. And when we go to the site, we will walk in just like tribute bearers of the past. We will pass by Grave Circle A, go past the housing district here where many wonderful things were found. And then up here on the hill is where the Megaron was. Remember that word from Pasipanasis, Megaron? Place where the king might have seen his subjects and debated with people about whether or not to go to war. That's going to happen right there. And an interesting defensive thing that happened in Mycenae, they hid a cistern so that if they were besieged, they had access to water. They didn't have to worry about their wells being poisoned. And that is hidden right up here. It's a small, nondescript passage that you descend down rock-cut stairs to the bottom. And when I was there in the early 2000s, it was still dank and wet down there. There's not a pool of water anymore, but you can tell it was a cistern. Now, here's some of the artwork that comes out of the Mycenaean rule over the Aegean. right away, we are seeing some imitation of Minoan styles here, but does it have the same quality as Minoan art? Look how different the hair is. The texture is very, very different. It's not as flowy and floating. The detail on the fabric of the dresses isn't quite so good. An imitation, but not an exact copy. Something else we've got here, once again, warfare. The Mycenaeans showing scenes of war. So we've got some soldiers here with their shields, helmets on, probably boar tusk helmets. And we can only imagine the battles are going off to, but right here, right on the edge, hard to see, a woman, maybe wife or mother, tearing out her hair in grief as the men go to war. And then up here, you guys remember that octopus juglet from before? This is the Mycenaean version. More symmetrical, more controlled, not as free. And another violent scene here, but a hunting scene. The lion hunt dagger. This is a bronze dagger inlaid with gold and silver. So we've got a lot of gold in that grave circle coming out, a lot of wealth going into graves that is then not being distributed back into society. It's just going in the ground until a few thousand years later, someone like me comes in and gets it. Now, look here. Look at the shape of the people. They have that kind of wasp waist, and how the lion turns his head back to look at the attack while someone falls under the lion's paws. Some people theorize this was actually done by a Minoan artist who was commissioned by Mycenaean. What do you guys think? Do you think it seems Minoan?
It's more detailed.
More detailed? Obviously very high quality work. It's up for debate. Think about it, and then when you see it in person in Athens, we'll talk about it. And speaking of, here's a real treat for you guys. You get to see a very dorky picture of me, my first time seeing this. With the bucket hat. But I was very, very excited to see this in person. It's been in so many of my textbooks, and it is such a beautiful piece. But that's the size of it right there. It's not very big. Very detailed, fine work. Okay, so we're moving to the Iron Age. Let me do a quick time check, see that. You get too bogged down. Okay, so the Iron Age. Now, this, of course, comes after the fall of the Bronze Age. Now, we could debate until the end of time about the fall of the Bronze Age and what happened. The facts I can give you is that if the Trojan War really did happen, it happened between 1250 and 1225 BCE. Most of the graves in the grave circle A predate that by about 200 years. While Schliemann, the excavator, thought that he had found proof of Agamemnon and those deceased from the Trojan War generation, his timing was off. He was off. So if the Trojan War happened in the 1200s, Bronze Age, like the collapse of the citadels, doesn't happen for another 100, 200 years afterwards. But it happens quickly. Suddenly, all the citadels within about a 200-year span are razed to the ground. Burned, abandoned. We have the walls left, but a lot of stuff, people just took stuff and left. Where were they? Some people theorize that there were invaders from the north coming in. Sometimes people say the coming of the Dorians, people from west or north. Some people say that maybe the redistribution system of the Palatines just collapsed under its own weight. That's possible too. But clearly a major historical event here, a big shift in the Greek mindset about how they wanted to live. And they left the cities, they left the citadels and went out into the country. Now, the technological achievement of iron was happening around the same time. The problem with smelting iron is that it has to get really, 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 really hot. Hotter than bronze needs to get. So it took a while for people to figure out how to make the fire hot enough, how to create an oven that could hold it hot enough. It was something that they had to work through. It took some time. But once they figure out iron, oh boy, whole new world of farming tools and weaponry. Now, we don't lose civilization completely. We sometimes call it a dark age. It's not really a dark age. We have evidence from this time period. People didn't just disappear off the face of the earth. They just moved and migrated to different sections. We see a cultural shift though. Now, one of those cultural shifts is the new village structure. So they're going back to small villages, and instead of humongous stone masonry palaces, they start building structures similar to this one, which is at Lufkandi, not too far from Mycenae in the grand scheme of things. Now, interestingly enough, this structure is still built on the same basic shape as a megaron. So they seem to have that in their memory, but you have a rounded off section here that was added later. And interestingly enough, this structure seems to have been retired because they buried 2 people inside of it, as well as horses. Now, we all know horses are not inexpensive animals, are they? I mean, we can figure that what you need to feed and house them, you know, horses take a lot of money. Why in the world would you sacrifice horses and bury them rather than have someone get use out of them during their lives? These must have been some pretty important people. Now, Lev Kandi, it's a very interesting site because of that, and it's still very mysterious to us. Some other things that were happening during this time that tell us about what life was like is the pottery, the artwork on the pottery. Geometric pottery is the style right here. Very, very full in the late geometric age of all these little details. And we get scenes like this. We see horses. These are men with shields right here. And then up here, we have a funeral scene. Something else that happened during this time, the Greeks were not slouching. They created the Olympic Games, 776. So we have this idea that as soon as the palaces are not being used, oh, everyone was so poor and sad. It was the Dark Ages, and they all just stayed in their homes. They didn't do anything. They were still Greeks. They were moving place. They were talking to each other. They were trading. They were organizing huge Pan-Hellenic games to share with each other and gather together in honor of their gods and also to just celebrate themselves. Now, the geometric pottery. This is my favorite of all time. This is literally my favorite artifact in the entire world. This is Athens 804. It's a call number of this wonderful, wonderful grave marker. This is a tombstone. Oh. And it's big, by the way. It's like that. I almost put a picture in of someone standing next to it, but it was such an awkward picture with someone like half blinking. But this is such an amazing example. Think about all the time, energy, and materials that went into this just for it to mark someone's grave. That's the big thing in society. Once you start seeing this sort of things, kind of devotion to death and all these grave goods going in, that's conspicuous wealth. It's wealth they don't need to survive. They can afford to put it into a grave with their loved one. A little bit of a detail here of the same artifact. This is the funerary scene. Very similar to what actually a lot of people think this was the same artist. Did that crater and this four right here. We have the deceased laid out. This hatching up here, that is to represent the shroud. And then we have our mourners flanking the sides. Here we have two people and then maybe a child. Right here, the family of the deceased. And the style is so different from what we saw in the Bronze Age, isn't it? No facial features, just silhouettes. Kind of stick figures as we think about it now. They even filled in between the figures with geometric shapes. Now here's something to consider. This kind of vase art was done with a slip. For those of you who aren't familiar with pottery, a slip is when you're filtering the clay And you filter it with water and pull out the thicker clay and then leave the water with the clay in it and then do this over and over and over again to have a very, very fine silty slip, water with just a little bit of clay in it. Then you go in to your base and you start painting. But that slip will air dry and disappear on the surface. It'll be very, very difficult to see with the naked eye where you have painted the slip. The slip that they used was very, very fine. Can you imagine being the artist and doing all this tiny little detail and the whole time your design is disappearing as you go? What an accomplishment. How much time and energy went into that. All right, keep moving forward. We're into the Archaic Age. This is a very, very exciting time. So this is the time when we start to see a heck of a lot of influence from the Egyptians and the Near East. And some very important political events happening for Greece. So we've gone through the Iron Age, the Dark Age, and we're coming back together again. We're forming city-states. A large city with a centralized power that controls the region around them, including the farms. And they're allied together in warfare. If our city-state goes to war, we know all the farmers who depend on the administrative center are going to go with us, and we've got allies in the next city-state next door, so we'll go to war together. It's that security, and we're starting to build a nation together. Now, that kind of warfare we know as hoplite warfare. And here's a cheeky vase right here, the cheeky vase, very famous, with a great image of the kind of warfare that the Greeks would have been engaging. Notice the large shields, spears, have their helmets on, and greaves, kind of shin guards. Now, something else Greece is doing, expanding. They're going out, they're exploring, they're colonizing. They are establishing colonies in all these places. Remember when we looked at that first map of the Mediterranean and how Greece is just a little brother of everybody else? They're starting to make their mark. They have a very interesting policy of colonization, by the way. In the city-state, you were drafted into colonization. Sometimes it drew lots, sometimes they did it as a form of punishment. But once they said, you're going to the colony that we're forming over in Asia Minor, you're going over there, you couldn't say no. You could not say no. Punishable by death if you refuse to go. And you need to go, and you need to take your family or establish a family over there, and you were going to stay there. That was how passionate they were about spreading out and expanding. Now, Athens is starting to rise in power. Now, here's the thing. Athens and Attica, it was around for the Bronze Age. There was a Bronze Age citadel in Athens. We didn't talk about it because it's not that impressive compared to Mycenaean, the Minoan civilization, but there was a Bronze Age powerhouse there. It's already kind of established as a center of its area. So it didn't really have to start from scratch when it started becoming that Athens that we think of in classical antiquity. It had a baseline, and they're gaining power. They developed their constitution during this period. What would be the foundational blocks for what would one day be their democracy? Now, keep in mind, Greek democracy meant in the beginning you had to be landowning, you had to be a man, no women could vote. You could not be enslaved, and you had to be Greek. You couldn't be from anywhere else and vote. You had to be Greek. Something that they were doing was establishing, with their democracy, voting practices. This is from our collection here. This is called an ostracon. The plural is ostraka or ostraca. This is a piece of pottery, just discarded, that they would pick up and write on. This was their sticky note. This was their notepad. Papyrus was too valuable to be wasting on these kinds of things. You know, you'd maybe write down the person's name you're voting for. and then they take it out. So you will literally be tripping over these in some parts of Greece. In the village where I was digging in at Mitru, I'd be walking around and literally just be kicking pottery sherds like that aside. They are so ubiquitous. And that represents their democracy, their practice of choice. Some other items from this period. Oh, I forgot we have our late Bronze Age, early Iron Age. Look at those. This is a lovely little jug. Very simple decoration, really beautiful orange slip here. And keep this image in your mind because I'm going to show you the next step and what a change there is. Really steps up to the plate when it comes to art. This is a kylix, a wine cup. I've got it upside down for you now so you can see the design. But if I was drinking and having some wine, just like that, 2 hands. I'm not going to use the handles because one thing you learn in archaeology, never trust a pot's handle, ever. Simple on the inside. And Corinth really loves those nature cheese in, and they love to add a little bit of red to pottery. This is a great example right here. This is a Corinthian style, possibly Corinthian imitation from probably 7th century BC. See little heads, feet underneath, that's a shield. These are hoplites, these are soldiers going off to war. Their shields covering them from neck to ankle. This is like Greece is trying to figure out the phalanx, how they're gonna fight to protect themselves using the shields to carry it. Very heavy. And going back to the question of who could vote in the Athenian democracy, if you were a soldier, you had to pay for your own stuff. You had to pay for the shield, the spear. So you had to have some money to be a soldier, become a veteran, and enjoy the benefits of it. All right, so what else we got? Oh, right here. So this goes into the democracy right here. This is a big old rock close to the Acropolis in Athens called the Areopagus. Now this, there's multiple ways to pronounce that, but this is the rock where the Boule, the council met. That started off as mostly a judicial force. They had their murder trials here. This hill was sacred to the god Ares, god of war. And so when there was murder, intentional or unintentional, they had their council here to determine the fate of the accused. I mean, this was a big shift, the idea of the government handling this kind of issue, because before this, it was a family matter. If someone killed one of your family members, it was up to your family to settle the issue, avenge, or collect a fine, which is pretty common. But the government decided to get involved in Athens. And that was a pretty new, big step. Now, Persia, one thing, Greece, little brother, they're starting to spread their wings. They're starting to colonize. And here comes the monster. Here comes Persia. Persia, during the Archaic Age, had conquered all this orange land. They conquered Egypt. Imagine how powerful they were to do that. They are spreading and spreading and spreading all over this land. They have a very, very well-run government, very tight. And this is a road, by the way. This is kind of like a Pony Express that they had. They could get messages from one end of their empire to another in a very short amount of time, very much like the American Pony Express. And they have been kind of like looking at Asia Minor over here. And keep in mind, there's all these Greek colonies along the coast right here. They're thinking like, ooh, that's a good coast. We can have all sorts of trade ships coming and going from there if we have that coast. We should take it over. So they come to town and they start conquering. And they give them an option. They come to all these Greek colonies and they say, give us some water and some earth. And that means become supplicants. You'll come under our protection, you'll fight with us, but you have to pay our taxes. And our taxes are a lot higher than the Greek taxes. So there's some Greeks who are actually like, okay, cool. We don't want to fight this fight. We'll give you land and we'll give you earth. In fact, they get all the way to about Thebes in Greece. Now, according to the Greeks, this is a heroic, epic battle, a world war. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened on earth. To the Persians, little border skirmish. Those pesky Greeks over there in like one little corner of our kingdom, like, But the Greeks are fighting back. They said, we're gonna, Athens is gonna fight. Athens says, Attica is not for sale, it's ours. Sparta, after a bit of convincing, backs Athens. It says, we're gonna fight too. Now Sparta, those are the big warriors. Those are the warriors. They're raised from birth to fight. If you're in Athens and you want to fight Persia, you want Sparta on your side. And so the Persian War happens. Multiple Persian wars, I should say. It goes for about a decade, 490s to 479 BC. So this war has been immortalized a few different ways. Recently, there's that movie 300 in the early 2000s. I see a lot of people nodding. So there's this battle at Thermopylae, and Thermopylae is about right there in Greece. So the Persians are trying to come down. They're using boats. They're coming around the bend. They keep shipwrecking because they don't know the Greek coast. They don't know how to sail it. So they get frustrated with this. They're like, okay, what are we going to do? So they said, let's just sail straight from the Hellespont here, straight across. Let's just avoid the coastline and go straight there. And so the Spartans are at Thermopylae and they want to fight. And there's about, I think it's 300 Spartans and 400 Greeks from Attica and a few other regions. So 700 against maybe, I don't even know the number of how many Persians were. I don't know if the Greeks knew. The Herodotus, the Greek historian, really inflates the number. It's not really trustworthy. And so the Spartans are holding Thermopylae. It's this narrow corridor where one side is the sea, one side is mountains. And they hold it just long enough for Athens to gather their troops and get ready for the fight. So we've got movies, we've got books, we've got comic books about this event. But it was really just buying time. The Spartans went into this knowing they were going to die. Everyone who's fighting there knew they were eventually going to be overcome by the Persians, and they were going to die. Now, let me find my spot in my notes here so I can shoot my numbers right. Okay, so Thermopylae happens 480, 479. There is a monument there. This is shortly followed by the Battle of Salamis, which is a naval battle. Now, here's the thing. The Persians have a lot of boats. They have a lot of people. They're outnumbering the Greeks. But what are the Greeks? Seafaring people, shipbuilders. And they build this amazing boat called a trireme that's long and thin and has a really strong nose. And they can ram with it. And so thanks to the funds that came out of Athens, the shipbuilders, and thanks to the Spartans for actually holding off the Persians long enough, the Persians are eventually defeated at the Battle of Plataea. So their forces are gradually weakened. They're weakened by the Spartans, weakened by the naval battle in Salamis, and then eventually weakened and defeated in a land battle at Plataea. Not before they raided and sacked Athens, though. They made it to Athens, and they destroyed the Acropolis. Razed it to the ground. That really hurt for the Greeks, by the way. That was their sanctuary to their goddess Athena. That was a big communal building project for them. And the Persians just came in and wiped it all out. Now, before we move on to the classical period, let's talk a little bit about the art and artistic contributions of this time. This is when the Homeric epics are composed. The Homeric epics are not contemporary history of the story as it was happening. The Homeric epics are composed by archaic orators who lived hundreds of years after the events that they're relating. It's legend, it's myth, and a little bit of history meshed together into a confusing mix that we still don't know today. Homer, as a character, probably was not a real guy. He was probably this amalgamation of a common poet or poor poet, usually depicted as blind. A lot of people argue that in the Odyssey, he kind of self-inserts himself as an orator. It's up for debate. And honestly, I haven't made my decision about whether or not I think that Homer was a real person. But the thing that we do know is that these poems, these epic poems, were composed over a long period of time through oral tradition and were eventually written down during the Archaic period. They show signs of having traveled all over Greece. So if you think about traveling orators telling stories, being hired in all these different places to go tell stories, doesn't it make sense that when they're visiting Davenport to tell a story, they insert a little bit of Davenport history in there? And so you can almost trace the story by where Odysseus goes or what King Priam references. Also, the Oriental style, this is Oriental. So this is Egyptian and Near Eastern influence on Greek art during this time through trade. The Corinthian style, and those plots I was just showing you, show a lot of Near Eastern themes like griffins, sphinxes, things like that. And we are getting some big strides in art on pottery. So this right here shows two different faces of pottery. Interestingly enough, this is two sides of the same pot. Not common, by the way. But we start getting black figure. This is when you have a pot where the natural color of the ceramic is this kind of orangey color. And then they use a slip to darken it. So the black is added on to the fabric of the base. And so you draw on the figures. They come out black from the firing. You can incise details to show the armor, their cloaks, things like that. And then at the end of the 6th century, around 520, 510 BCE, someone figures out, why don't we flip it around? What if the figures were orange instead of black? What if we reserved the place for those figures? We can add a lot more detail then. They're not just silhouettes anymore. So that stride forward in art in Athens is like that. Literally a decade, in thousands of years, a decade, this big stride forward in art happens. Images become more dynamic, more detailed. They start labeling more things and really taking seemingly a lot more pride, the Athenians, in their ceramics. They're signing their stuff. And this is the time we start getting that philosophy. We start getting that drama. We start getting that literature. Hesiod is writing. The Homeric epics are being written down. Plays are being written and performed. And the philosophers are out there questioning everything. Here's something important to know with this huge moment in Greek history. Greece never ever combined their religion with their government. The government officials, the elected officials, were completely separate from the priesthood. There was no overlap. If you were a philosopher questioning the gods, questioning life, the purpose, should I be paying my tribute to the centralized authority? No one was going to stop you. There was no God you had to answer to, no priest who would be angry at you questioning the beliefs. And so they spread their ideas freely and quickly. We just see an explosion of culture during this time. And that's why I was saying the archaic period is such a cool period. And sculpture is striding forward as well. This is all up to here, archaic. So we start off the archaic period with that Near Eastern Egyptian influence. We have a standing male figure here known as a poros, means young boy. And he has rather triangular hair. He's a bit stiff. His weight is evenly balanced between his 2 feet. That's Egyptian. That's an Egyptian pharaoh stance right there. His abdominal line here is literally just a line. No rounding of the musculature. And we step a little bit more forward, start rounding things off, making it a little bit more human. A little bit rounder, a little bit more detail in the anatomy, a little bit softer. And then you hit classical, and you start to get the more natural shifting of weight, contrapposto, a little bit of an S curve. Like when someone's at rest, they're not standing like this. That's too formal. Let's show them the way they really are. And then at the end there, Hellenistic. That's way, way forward. So entering the classical period. Let's see, does anyone need a break, by the way? Bathroom break, anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's. This is a good part to break on. And I promise just a few more slides after this. We do not have far to go. I promise you. Restroom is going to be right up this way. Just exit out the theater, and then or alongside the theater, and it's to your left. Sorry, guys. I should have asked earlier if anyone needed bathrooms.
I just don't want, I'm fine.
During the war.
I'm sorry. Yes. Well, the Italians weren't really in the game yet. It's mostly colonized. Some of them side and a lot of southern areas. Yeah, like just for the range. We're so close to that. We're so okay. So the period works where so Rome starts getting real interested in Western Greece. So general period helped moved in. So where's that? Oh, and technically, that is big resistance. And that is like 2.
Rome didn't really get burned.
Well, Rome actually, the empire does start before. That's around 33 is when we see the big shift. But Roman Republic starts going strong, and that's
You're gonna be really good.
She can come in. It's pretty informative.
Yes, I think it's automated at this point. I can make it too.
Yeah, okay, okay.
But thank you for blaming.
Yeah.
It was so much. And of course, please ends up on the right. Yeah, we're not gonna get much further. Yeah.
Well.
And.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really started with the phone.
You know, and the meats that survive are stone and ceramic and metal. Civilizations before that, they didn't use as materials, like, you know, in the Neolithic age, you know, that had mud brick, you know, you know, that stuff wasn't supposed to survive, especially in real soil versus berries. So we do that. And the evidence shows that the first European civilization, civilization, the building, like, you know, big buildings, and then happens in Crete. I mean, no one's really started, they kind of start right here. And then in Greece, they just kind of call. So the tribes that were in Italy before maybe were there, but they just weren't doing stuff on the scale.
Credit for everything.
Yeah, they copy lots of your Greeks too.
Everything.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, Romans, you know, as they were going out conquering the world, they took a lot of influence into their conquering. Yeah, and they also imposed a lot of their own, you know, their own practices on them.
Because, then it's gonna, you know, all that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Romans, like, the Greeks had a much purer democracy than the Romans, because the Romans always had an emperor after Augustus. And then, you know, that's time went on, you know, in there, they have, you know, two people, right? One of them did working. All right, this is for a really late guy. But it's just not as big yet. But the Romans, they're both. They've been toting around to so many different places at this point.
I've got some that have gotten close to the middle of it. Yeah, these are, yeah, let me, I got a thicker one of the bands.
Copper and tin increased in some of the recipes, they sort. Yeah. But either using this copper and something that it's a copper. Which
See.
yeah, brass is not like, they have a trade for everything to get, they still have access to the copper and the tin. He's just sitting here. I found very close to. If you like. Oh my God, it's so pretty. And the book. When I was Good. All right, so let's put them together.
Thank you. Get that. Get it with a big light. Now look for me later.
What you guys are building these are with. Now, is everyone comfortable with the lights on? Would you put them off or do you okay with them on? It's great. Lights on, okay, great.
Yeah.
We are entering the classical period, and I promise just a few slides left. You guys have been so great. Thank you so much for your patience and enthusiasm. All right, so classical Greece. This is what most people think of as ancient Greece in their head. This is, the height. This is, yeah, we're leaving the light. Okay,
We're making it.
So we come out of the Persian Wars. The Persians have been expelled from Greece. We consider this kind of a cultural moment for Greece. They come together, they fought together. That feeling of Greek nationality, pan-Hellenism, is strong in their breasts. You think they'd probably be able to work together for a good long while. Yeah, this was my rough draft right here, and then I just decided to leave it in. Civil War's that crazy. So Athens and Sparta worked together to expel the Persians. And Athens ends up getting a lot of credit for it. And the Spartans are still honored for their contributions, but it was the Athenian Attic silver that paid for all those wonderful warships. And Athens said, well, we were the ones who said we need to fight now, fight back against the Persians when we were all debating this. The Spartans had to be convinced. So we should be in charge. We should be the ones who are in charge of all these cities, all these regions of Greece. They're the ones who have the Acropolis. They're the ones who have all these fantastic poets and orators and playwrights. They're feeling themselves at this point. And they have pretty good reason to. They've got a lot of exciting things happening. So something you've probably seen in some textbook before at some point, the different types of columns. You got Doric, Ionic with the scrolls, and Corinthian. It's just a little bit extra, just like the pottery. Now, these columns are the styles used when they decide to rebuild the Acropolis. Now, all this money that it would cost to rebuild the Acropolis, where's that coming from? It's not all just Attic silver. It's Athens who say, we're in charge now. We're in charge of the Delian League, this League of Nations, and you're all going to give us your money. We pay for those ships, so You guys need to pay us back a bit. We're gonna protect you if the person's come knocking again. You owe us some money. So this grand rebuilding program is being funded not just by the Athenians, but from Greeks all over the place. Now, in the 400s, they're working on building the Acropolis up to what it would be. Meanwhile, all over Athens, once again, all this artwork is happening. And you saw this gentleman in the previous slide where I had all the statues lined up next to each other, the Critias boy. He's got that famous contrapposto kind of casual stance. He's a really beautiful example of what's becoming a mastery of anatomy with the Greek artist. His musculature is very, very naturalistic. This is also the period of historians like Herodotus and Thucydides. This is the period of Aeschylus, Sophocles, Aristophanes, and Euripides. Most of the Greek plays that you've heard of came from this period. But they just can't stop fighting. Before I talk about Alexander the Great and Philip, let's talk about the Acropolis. Now, we're going to go to the Acropolis on our trip here. We're going to be able to actually see all this in person. Here's a picture of the Parthenon lit up at night right here. Beautiful fluted columns. Some of you probably all know this, but like the engineering that went into the Parthenon is astounding. They knew that seeing the columns from a distance, the human eye would think that the columns were skinnier in the middle. It's just kind of an optical illusion that happens. So they made it so the middles of the columns were just ever so slightly wider to fight the optical illusion. On the Parthenon, they had sculptural pediments memorializing mythical wars, friezes all around showing wars against centaurs, wars against giants, wars against titans, wars against Amazons, and they're all being used as allegories for the Trojan War. This is their look at us moment.
Who built this? Were they slaves? Were they people, Greek artisans? Who?
You've hit on something very interesting here. So throughout all this and throughout the rise of democracy in Greece, there are slaves. They're doing a lot of the menial labor. Now, the Acropolis, you would have had your experts, your engineers, your architects working on this, the whole of the Acropolis, working on all the different building programs. The lugging, probably there, it's like, was it a public program with, publicly employed laborers, or were they using a slave labor force?
It's Greek, so.
It's in records, but like how accurate, like Athenians just thinking, it costs so much, we got to pay all these people, like where they. But as far as numbers of who was in what, I do not have that information.
Why would someone use an ionic column versus a Doric versus brick? Why the three choices and what represents what in architecture? Why would you choose one over the other?
Well, your stylistic choice there could be an act of patriotism. Maybe you in your city-state have an affinity with the Dorians, maybe with the Ionians. Maybe your city-state is connected to the Ionians who started in Greece, then colonized Asia Minor, and basically made that their home. Corinthian was really very showy, So it really depends on what message you're trying to send. The Parthenon and most of the Acropolis was all about Greece and the Greek identity. It was very much this is us. And while the outside influences are very subtle here, they're still there. They're still there. Remember, columns are Minoan, but also Egyptian, Near Eastern. The Greeks aren't afraid of their past, but they do like to massage it. Now, this building right here, this is a very, very interesting building stylistically. This is called the Erection, and that is right there. It's a weird building. So this temple has this weird shape. So right here, the caryatid portico. So these are women, statues of women being used as columns. And this tree right here, that olive tree, according to legend, was, oh my gosh, it's getting late. My brain is starting to go. The olive tree was planted by a god, either Poseidon or Zeus. And I'm thinking it's Poseidon, but sorry, I'm starting to go. I can only do this for so long. And so Zeus. So, well, Poseidon sometimes
Came on.
he sometimes did some stuff that was on land. But anyway, the tree was planted by God. Let's move on. And so this olive tree represented Athens. And when the Persians came in and sacked the Acropolis, what happened to the tree? Some people claimed it survived. It was untouched miraculously. Probably not. A common legend that followed was that the tree was knocked over, but then a little sprout came out from the trunk and it regrew. And this is kind of like we have, immortal flames. This is such an idea. As long as this olive tree is here, the Greeks have hope. The Greeks have power. Now, some other features of the Acropolis. Propylaea right here, that's your entrance, right there, big monumental entrance to the Acropolis. And Athena Promachus, so that was this colossal statue of Athena. Oh, yeah.
According to Google.
Yes, I remember, God, Google.
Because they know everything. It was Athena.
Oh, Athena finds a olive
Acropolis.
tree?
The goddess Athena is said to have planted the first olive tree on the Acropolis during a contest with Poseidon.
Thank you. There's the sign.
Becoming the patron goddess of Athens. So it was according to the sheet.
And keep in mind too, Athena is the goddess of war and strategy. And what did they just get through? A giant war that they came out victorious. So really doubling down on Athena, patron goddess of Athens, who has all the money, who's getting even more money from everybody. This big old building program all dedicated to Athena and the greatness of Greece. Really makes sense, doesn't it? Now, something I'm excited about, the last time I was in Greece, the Temple of Athena Nike was not there. They were conserving it, they'd taken it down brick by brick. Now, last I heard, it is up. Ooh, and I'll get to see it. Here's why I'm excited. The temple, I wish I had put a photo of this in here. The Temple of Athena Nike is the cutest little temple you've ever seen. Next to all this big monumental stuff is this cute little simple temple that's on an outcrop right as you walk up. It's right off to your right side, and I'm just so excited to see it. All right, and another dorky picture of me. So when I was there, they were doing some work on the side of the Parthenon. Right there. But this is still what you're going to see. So you're going to see the rough rock. There is a kind of a walkway for you that's smoothed out, but do expect to, wear comfortable shoes. And you'll be walking, scrambling all over this big rock that they've brought. Okay, and we are coming to the end of our program here. All right, Hellenistic. So on the previous slide, I had Philip II and Alexander the Great listed. Philip II of Macedon is the father of Alexander. And this is Philip right here. Now, Alexander up here, from the famous Alexander Mosaic. That's from Pompeii.
Yeah.
Now, Philip was this fantastic military leader. And Alexander, his son, he wanted to be one too. And he was. I mean, Alexander literally conquered the known world. Alexander. I mean, when we saw the picture of the Persian Empire versus the Greek Empire, that was all Alexander now. Took it over, and it was Hellenistic. Now, Philip and Alexander were Macedonians. They were from north of Greece. And Philip's tomb, Alexander's brother's tomb, and supposedly Alexander's son's tomb are available to see as the Royal Tombs of Regina, which we will be stopping at in Thessaloniki. So we actually get to see these tombs and the incredible riches within these. These guys were conquerors. They were conquerors. They had a lot of stuff by the end of their lives. Now, here's the thing. Alexander's reign is short. 332 to 323 BCE. That is short. He starts conquering the known world and does not live much to see it in its full form. His kingdom, his empire that he built is divided up after his death. Amongst lots of generals. Egypt goes to Ptolemy, for example. And it kind of splits the empire up. And then from Italy, these Italians, they start looking at Western Greece. They're like, yeah, we've got some common blood here, you know. There's native Italians, and then there's the Greek colonists, and they've started to intermarry. And like, there's really good land over there. There's stuff we want. And so the Romans come knocking at the door in Western Greece. This is Pyrrhic. The Pyrrhic comes from General Pyrrhus, who was fighting on the Greek side. And he amassed his forces and wanted to fight off the Romans, and he was the victor. He did win, but he lost so many men, so many resources. He said, if I have another victory like this, I will surely lose everything. That's paraphrasing. So that's where we get that term Pyrrhic victory from, where it's a victory, but it's such a loss that doesn't really even feel like a victory. And the Romans are growing. They're becoming stronger. And eventually, they win. 146 BC, Battle of Corinth, the Romans officially take power. Basically, Roman occupation. The Romans are spreading out. Now, around this time, I'm going to draw our attention over to Turkey and Ephesus. Now, Ephesus really has its heyday in the Hellenistic and Roman period. Now, Ephesus starts off as a Greek colony. It has a turmoil, changes hands a few times. And then Ptolemy III in 246, one of the Hellenistic leaders post Alexander the Great, comes and takes over. And looks around and is like, man, this is nice. Got this great temple to Artemis, got some good stuff here. Well, like most post-Alexander leaders, they put in building programs, they invest in the community, they ask for taxes. And then in 129, the Roman Republic. So Ephesus is taken under Roman rule, Roman Republic, in 129 BC. Now, at that point, Rome is still the Republic. Rome is the Republic up until the Battle of Actium in 33 BC, where Mark Antony and Cleopatra, yes, that Cleopatra, are defeated in battle. Guess who gave them all the ships for their battle? Ephesus.
Oh.
Ephesus gave them all the money, all the timber for their ships. Now, you would think that Augustus, who was the one fighting against Cleopatra, would be a little miffed about this. But he sees the value in it. He actually makes Ephesus the capital of Asia Minor, the most important city in that entire subcontinent. Once again, they have a temple of Artemis that at one point was one of the wonders of the world. This incredibly gigantic temple of Artemis. I didn't include a picture of her, but the Ephesus version of Artemis is very, very distinctive. She is definitely kind of a mothering figure, despite the fact that Artemis was a perpetual virgin in Greek mythology. And she is covered in mammary glands, shall we say? I didn't include a picture for a reason, but from here,
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Yeah, that is the Ephesus version of Artemis. Now, the temple was huge and rich. And the Romans start investing more and more in community and mission the library. So you see here. This is the third largest library in the world after the Library of Alexandria and the Library of Pergamum. All things must come to an end. Actually, that is a point of contention, whether it was a fire that was intentionally set or an act of God, basically. But people start blaming each other. And there's no way to know now whether it was intentional or not. But in the end, it's destroyed. It burns down. The questionable nature of it makes it seem like it wasn't a military campaign or anything that took down the library. It seems to have just been an incident. All right. And that's where we're going to end today. I'm done torturing you.
You feel a lot of stuff.
This is just to kind of give you the idea of everything that we didn't cover. We have been together through, well, if we don't put the Neolithic in, we have been through 3,500 years of history today. So we should call it, don't give us a test. But there's a lot more to learn about modern Greece. If you guys want, we can talk about it in another session when we get together. Very interesting things happen in the medieval period when the Venetians actually take control of parts of Greece. And we're going to see examples of that Phoenician occupation at Nafplio. And we spend the night there around the time that we're seeing Mycenae. So there's so much to learn. If anyone would like any recommendations for research and books, I'd be happy to. And like I said, there's wonderful primary sources that we can use, ancient authors who tell it in their own words. Not always trustworthy, take it with a grain of salt, but that's true for most history. So. All right. And if anyone would like any more information about the trip and maybe talk to Linda about registering, what that entails, now's a great time, but let's open the floor to any questions. If you have questions either about the trip or about the presentation, I will do my best to answer.
Is it going to be hot over there?
So the time of year that we're going to be there, we're looking at high 60s, low 70s.
Perfect.
I would imagine it will get chilly on the cruise when we're out at sea.
Okay.
But yeah,
Good.
some layers would be good. Yeah, and comfortable shoes.
Very
Comfortable shoes.
Do we need to bring a dress or anything?
I don't think we're visiting any religious sites that would require skirts. No. Yeah, only if you want to.
No. Yes. Quick to say, I think the best shoes to have, layers, because during the fall it's going to be windier. But when we are in the Peloponnese, we have our own coach. And I'll have you have just like a small tote bag or backpack where you can have your layers with you.
Yeah.
Bring your sunglasses, bring sunscreen.
Yeah.
We will have water on the coach, but it's really important to keep drinking your water. And we've included most of the meals in the Peloponnese, and when you're on the cruise, there's lots of food, and yes, there is lots of drink. The history. Be in Mycenae. we're going to be in Ephesus. And when we're in Thessaloniki and you get to do the tour of the tomb of Philip II and the son of Alexander the Great, and then the wife of Philip. That, in my mind, was the most spectacular museum. There is so much gold, and the way they have displayed it, they've actually, the museum is in a cave because that's where they found the remains, and it had never been pilfered. So because that we are doing our own exclusive group tour there, we felt that was so important. And the same thing in Ephesus, we've included that in the cost of the tour, and we've included a lot in the cost.
Yeah. It's so rare to have an unrobbed tomb in antiquity. I mean, that's why King Tut was such a big deal. Like, this is a really big deal to be able to see these tombs, see this museum. And I'm just so excited.
The other thing that I've shared with a number of you when I've been on the phone, in 2024, I happened to reach a milestone birthday. And
21.
didn't advertise it, I just kind of told other people who were maybe staying by their own birthday, you wanted to go to Greece with me. And so I put together what I felt, and my research was, I thought, the perfect trip. And so I've already lived this trip once and stayed at every hotel that we're staying at. And the guide that we're having in the Peloponnese, he's agreed to do it again. So there's so many things that that Nora and I can feel very, very confident because I've done it. And doing it a second time makes it even better, because there's things that I couldn't do on the first trip. And in July, we're going to get together and you're going to learn about some of the optional tours that you can take on the various islands. So that if you're into going to an archaeological site, or you want to do wine tasting, or if you want to go to all of those should be available to you. We just have to wait till you make your final payment before we do that.
Yeah, that meeting that you're talking about is going to be in July, where we do the Choose Your Own Adventure. By the way, if anyone needs a schedule of the pre-trip programs, I have a lot here, so please feel free to take one. And just a reminder, our next one is Thursday, May 15th. It's going to be combined with the Putnam History on Tap program, where Dr. Kirsten Day, a professor of classics at Augustana, is going to be presenting on her specialty, some research that she's been doing about the influence of Greek mythology and epic on modern media. To learn a little bit more about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And and I hear there's a new Odyssey movie coming out. Interesting, a little scary, I don't know. Cautiously optimistic. But yeah, please feel free to take a schedule. May 15th is our next meeting for History on Tap. Of course, none of these are required, but I do encourage you to come. I'd love to get to know all of you a little bit better before we travel, and also just learn some wonderful things about Greek mythology. We really didn't get into mythology very much. I'm leaving it for Kirsten Day. But she's very nice. She was actually just here looking at our Greek collection. So, wonderful scholar. And then July, we'll do Choose Your Own Adventures, where you choose your excursions. And then in September, we do a final meeting to get all of our documents together. And then we depart on September 29th. Yeah, excited.